And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Wednesday morning's flying weather showing a big area of IFR out here over the Bering Sea in toward the southwest coast and down to the Pribilofs. Marginal VFR from Adak eastward here to the Alaska Peninsula. Some IFR though on the Pacific side of the peninsula, but Kodiak Island VFR, Bristol Bay VFR, and a band of lower conditions here in the western interior all the way up to the central Arctic coast. There's some IFR. Otherwise to the east, central eastern interior, Arctic coast, all the way down across the Panhandle, good VFR. That holds into the afternoon. In fact, actually improves over the western interior as IFR kind of presses up toward the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area along the coast, maybe a little bit inland tomorrow afternoon, up across St. Lawrence Island, and maybe the Alaska Peninsula looking at some IFR, and that's about it. A little bit of marginal VFR for the central and western Arctic coast. Good VFR in the interior, but marginal VFR spreading up across Kodiak Island. And for the next day, more moisture showing up here for the eastern and northern Bering Sea. You've got IFR now into the Chukchi Sea, down across Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, along the northwest coast, close to Kotzebue, across the western central Seward Peninsula, all the way down along the west coast here to the Alaska Peninsula. IFR up at least to Sitkinak Island there for Kodiak, otherwise marginal VFR. And marginal VFR now pushing up into the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula area, into Cook Inlet, but interior staying mostly or just about all VFR, maybe some IFR for the eastern Arctic coast there, and good VFR for the southeast coast. And that holds through the afternoon for the Panhandle. A couple of VFR days coming up, a couple more, and that up into the eastern North Gulf Coast. Marginal VFR now, Prince William Sound, and the Kenai Peninsula, northern Cook Inlet, VFR, all the way up to the Arctic coast again. And a good band of IFR here from, well, the northwest coast, Seward Peninsula, northern Bering Sea, right across the southwest interior, Bristol Bay to Kodiak Island, improving to the west there, that band VFR for the Pribilofs down to the eastern Aleutians, western Alaska Peninsula. Passes, all passes open tomorrow, so we've got VFR for the Brooks Range for Anatuvik and Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, rainy, same forecast, windy, open. And Isabel, good VFR. Mentasta, VFR in either approach. And Tanita, same forecast, VFR. Portage, VFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR. So moving on to the freezing levels here, off the coast of the Panhandle, down across Dixon Entrance for the surface there, and down to just east and south of Kodiak Island. But north of the Pribilofs, in fact, the warmer air here in the southerly flow, we've got 6,000 feet up to the Alaska Peninsula. And icing, considerable moderate rime icing, quite an area here over the eastern Bering Sea into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, down into Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, Unalaska Island, up to St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait, icing free central interior and the Panhandle, Gulf of Alaska included. And for the jet stream here, strong northwest jet along and just off the southeast coast here, blowing right across Yakutat at 135 knots, and then lighter westerly flows, 33,000 feet here out of mainly the west in the interior, and then south to north flow here basically about 110 to 125 knots there, eastern Bering Sea across the Seward Peninsula. And 9,000 feet, again, still looking at wind flow from south to north here, 70 to 75 knots in this area here, and then dropping off to about 40 knots there across the Bering Strait. And for the southeast coast, northwest winds, 40 to 50 knots. 3,000 feet, lighter winds at this elevation, but still maybe 25 knots there along the north coast of the Panhandle. East-southeast 25 knots for the eastern Arctic coast. Easterlies 45 knots here in northern Koyukuk Valley, all the way across the Kobuk Valley to the northwest coast with the strongest winds here, south to north across the Alaska Peninsula and the southwest coast. They're anywhere from 55 to 65 knots. And about 40 knots out of the west-southwest for the Pribilofs, 50 knots from the west for the central Aleutians. And with that strong wind area here, we've got considerable moderate turbulence, pretty likely for the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, the Lotto Hills, down across all of the southwest part of the state to the Alaska Peninsula, and also some pretty good mechanical turbulence here for the northern panhandle and maybe the eastern North Gulf Coast around Yakutat.